Staying calm amidst the storm. Friends, I don't know about you, but recent events in our nation and our world have left me feeling a little bit like Jesus' disciples in this story this morning from Mark's Gospel. Ever since I was with you last in late June, and arguably long before then, it feels like we've been buffeted by one storm after another. A dangerously escalating conflict in the Middle East. The attempted assassination of a former president and presidential candidate, the toppling of the candidacy of our current president and his replacement by the vice president, extreme weather from hurricanes to record heat to wildfires. And that's just the last 6 weeks, right? And that's not including all the things that might be going on in our own lives. I know that some of you have weathered storms this summer. And so, yes, like the disciples in that boat, I've been feeling a little knocked about, storm-tossed, battered, lost at sea even, sometimes hopeful, other times uncertain about the fate of our planet, our blue boat home. Sometimes encouraged, other times fearful for our precarious ship of state. Sometimes I find myself looking around for where the lifeboats are. And so I get it when in this story the disciples want to turn to someone else, someone they trust, a higher power, right, to get them to calm the storm. There are times when I wish some higher power would just make all the turmoil and chaos in my life go away. I get it. But that's not my faith. I wish I believed that. I've tried to believe that. But I don't. So I take Jesus' miracle with a grain of salt. But I take to heart his question to the disciples. He says to them, "Why are you afraid? Have you no faith?" How do we summon the faith to withstand the turbulent waters of our lives and our world? If it's not the hand of God reaching down to make everything okay, then what resources, what inner resources can we turn to sustain ourselves amidst life's storms? How do we cultivate calm amidst the storm? Now, I don't want you to misunderstand me. When I say I seek calm amidst the storm, I am not saying that I want to retreat from the struggles and tumult of the world, to avert my eyes from injustice or turn my back on suffering. If that were my desire, I never should have become a Unitarian Universalist, and neither you. For ours is a faith that makes its home in this world, that stands by this world, stands with this world, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, through thick and thin till death do us part. Ours is a faith that seeks to repair and redeem this world, the only one we've got. So no, it's not a retreat from the world that I seek. When I say I want to discover calm amidst the storm, I'm saying that I want to find a way to remain grounded and centered, strong and resilient. Both so I can weather the storm and hopefully flourish after it passes, but also so I can show up for others in turbulent times in ways that are helpful and constructive, in ways that don't further trouble the waters. I want to be able to meet the world's tumult with a measure of peace and strength and insight and wisdom. Now, if the story of Jesus calming the storm doesn't quite capture what I'm trying to say, then this insight from Thich Nhat Hanh, I think, gets a little closer to the heart of the matter. The late Vietnamese monk would often share a story born of the turbulent violence in his own nation. During the Vietnam War, of course, thousands of Vietnamese fled their country, setting out across the sea in small, often inadequate boats, like so many refugees before and since. Many didn't survive the journey. Thich Nhat Hanh explains that when the refugees' boats encountered a storm, sometimes people would panic. And their panicked activity would further destabilize the boat and it would capsize. On the other hand, if people remained calm in the storm, they often survived. Survivors' stories attest that sometimes, if even just one person on the boat remained calm, it influenced others and settled the panic and saved lives. Thich Nhat Hanh goes on to say that in a crisis, folks will often say, well, don't just sit there, do something. But the lesson he takes from this story is the opposite. Don't just do something, sit. By which he means pause, breathe, find your inner calm, and then from that place, from that centered, rooted, non-reactive place, then act. Don't just do something, sit. Then do something. That's what he's trying to say. I think we have to ask ourselves in turbulent times whether our response to a situation is making things better, calming the waters, helping right the ship, or if in our fearful, reactive, and sometimes not well thought out responses, we ourselves end up feeding the crisis. I can think back to so many times in my life when acting from hurt and fear, I made a bad situation worse. Dug a deeper hole, ratcheted up the level of anxiety and danger in a crisis. And you know what? More and more, I've been trying to reflect on how I show up for the crises in our shared life as a nation and as a world. I got to ask myself, am I meeting hate with hate? Fear with my own fear? Or am I centering my values and moving forward with love and justice in my heart? I'm just saying, it's been on my mind. Now, last week I had the pleasure of worshiping with and listening to one of the great preachers, the Reverend Otis Moss III, who's the Obama's minister from Chicago. And he was telling a story about Howard Thurman, the great mystic and activist, advisor to Dr. King, mentor to Dr. King. Though Howard Thurman spent a portion of his life right here across the river at BU, Thurman was born in Florida and grew up there. And he talks about how one of the lessons that he learned living in Florida was how to survive a storm. Because as a boy, right, he watched countless, hurricanes and tropical storms pass over that state, pass through that state. And when the storm was over and he'd opened the door to his home and surveyed the damage, he was struck over and over again by this observation. The things that survived the storm were things with roots. Great big palm trees that swayed in the wind, that bent back and forth, that sometimes bent all the way over, but did not break, right? Because their roots went deep into the ground. Other trees and plant life whose roots didn't grow down, but who grew out and mingled with the roots of those plants around them, forming a network of connection that allowed themselves to weather the storm. They survived too. By contrast, Thurman observed any structure that had just been, slapped together on the surface of the ground without a good foundation, without roots, was destroyed in the storm, swept away. What practices in your life allow your roots to go deep? What practices help you put those roots deep down in the fertile soil of spirit so that when the storm comes, you bend, yes, but don't break? Prayer, meditation, yoga, journaling, a long walk in nature, something else? Roots don't grow overnight. So we need to be laying these roots down long before the storm comes, right? So that they're there for us when we need them. Roots hold me close. Wings set me free. And let's not forget those trees whose roots grow not deep but wide, connecting them to whole ecosystems of plant life. None of these trees would have survived the storm on their own, and the same goes for us. When the storms come, we need to be grounded in community. Communities like our family and friends, our neighborhood, our church. These connections also don't grow overnight, and they're not easy to sustain. And they're threatened by the blight of loneliness and isolation. They take time and patience to cultivate. And people who are willing to help make the garden of community grow. Friends, 2024 has already been a tumultuous year. And as I've said several times this year, we don't know what the rest of this year will bring for us, or our nation, or our world. But one thing I do know is that we're going to need each other. We need to be rooted in the strength of loving community. So speaking of storms in Florida, I have one final story for you. Some of you may not know that about when I graduated from college, for about 3 years, I worked for Habitat for Humanity, the faith-based home building ministry that Jimmy and Rosalind Carter helped build. Habitat for Humanity uses volunteers, right, to build homes in partnership with those experiencing housing insecurity. And I remember just before I went to work for Habitat that there was a famous image circulating. I was trying to think, this was before social media. I don't even know how images circulated back then, but this one was circulating nonetheless. And it was an aerial photo of a neighborhood in Florida taken in the aftermath of a devastating hurricane. And the photos showed that most of the neighborhood was completely leveled by the storm. Wasn't even any debris remaining. It had all been swept away. But curiously, there was one corner of the neighborhood where about 15 homes were standing, completely intact. Right? And it turns out, of course, that those were the homes built by the volunteers at Habitat for Humanity. Right? Yes, amen. Now, this image was a huge boon for Habitat. And the founder, our founder, used to say that, the reason those houses survived the hurricane is because Habitat puts love in the mortar joints of our houses, right? Then he admitted that there was probably another reason, which is that when you ask a volunteer to build a house with you and you tell them to put 2 nails in each stud, they're not sure of their work, and so they end up putting about 3 or 4 in each stud, and that helps it survive during the hurricane, right? Either way, the point of the story is that in a storm, we all want to be sheltered by a sturdy home built with love. So if storms are coming, friends, and of course they are, they always are, well then let them come. And we will be the calm amidst the storm. We will put down deep roots, grounding our souls in the loam of the Spirit. We will stretch our roots wide, reaching out to one another, creating a web of loving connection. We might bend, but we won't break. And we will build here, a home that will shelter and sustain us and all who seek refuge from the storm. May it be so, and amen.